Right. Should be streaming, I think. Coming up, people, in 6-7 minutes time. Forecast with Simon Richards. Should be streaming, I think. Coming up, people, in... Hold on. 6-7 minutes time. What's going on there? Oh, blimey. Forecast with Simon Richards. Bit of an echo. Streaming. All right. See you in a bit. Davies on YouTube. Ollie thought it was 9 p.m. You bullfrog. Yeah, it is 9 o'clock BST UK time. That yeah. Right, I can see you lot on Facebook, on YouTube. I know I've been pretty bad taking comments on Facebook. I know that. I apologise, but hang in there. We're sorting out. Jay and me are sorting out this new system on the site so that you can log in from Facebook to the Daily Chaos.news site and comment there or whatever. And yeah, I know, Tanis, I can see you. I know you had problems logging in at the new site. That was because there was a problem with the site, basically, which is sorted. So tell me, do me a favour, let me know. You should now be able to log in. Lots of teething problems, yeah. Do 3 minutes, people. 2.5, 3, something like that. They're going to play when you're ready.
It's all you and me. We'll kiss the sky.
Yeah, the fade is working. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to the Daily Chaos. Ordo ad chao, you know what I mean? I'm Olly Connelly. Thanks for turning up. And now, forecast. Buffeted by the winds of change, culture wars, plutocratic revolution, manipulation and technological revolution. Where the deuce are we heading over the next few years? It sounds bloody awful, huh? All serious stuff. But to hell with that. Because we've got super creative Cy Richards here to spin some satire into the mix. But is it satire? And what the deuce is the difference between satire and reality these days? And yeah, I've got all my windows in a pickle over these two screens. Guess what? Couldn't find the fader, couldn't find the script, can't find my arse. Yeah, my old mate, Cy Richards, here to give a satirical spin on some, I don't know, ludicrous times. Oh, Richards, good evening, sir. In Bath. Sunny Bath.
I thought
How
you said.
are you?
I'm great. Well, I thought you said warcast, not a forecast.
Yeah.
All the wars that are about to happen, and at the same time, on my other window, I've got this. I was trying to buy a USB fan from Amazon.
Oh yeah.
And
I need one of them. Yeah. Actually, I've got one.
Completely taken away by this Chinese dropshipping brand called TED Form, TED Gem, who are promising 180 different kinds of wind speed experience for £11.90. So it's hard to argue,
right?
You know,
and it's bunging out coronavirus on tap.
I know, it's great. It's great. But yeah, I thought you meant warcast. I was thinking, all right, so this is about who's going to go to war with who over the next few years.
Well, it makes you wonder. And that is a good question. I saw this thing. I sent this thing to you. This sort of military place, deagle.com. I mentioned it on the show a couple of nights ago. And they give a load of military analysis or something. And apparently they are an advisor to governments around the world, for example. And if you go to their website, deagle.com, they've got itemization of all the military kit that every government buys around the world, with some margin of error, no doubt. But I mean, it's pretty impressive, their intel. And they also cover lots of military news, so you'd think they're pretty well placed. And they're predicting that the US population by 2025 and the UK, the same deal, are going to reduce by 70%. 70%. So I don't know where they get that from. China stays about the same. Yeah. European countries, generally speaking, again, deplete considerably by millions and millions. I don't know where they're getting this intel. I'm trying to find out. Some people watching this show know Simon Bean, MBE, who pops on every now and then. He is looking into this as well. But I don't know, Cy. I mean, we are just in such... I know Cy, by the way, people, going back about 30 odd years, from the days when we were working at Planet 24, where they used to put on the big breakfast, you know, that thing with Chris Evans and all that. Trying to, I don't know, not get buggered by the people that ran the place, or I don't know, cut up by Bob Geldof or something, who owned the place as well. Anyway, mate, mad times.
Funniest moment of my career, mate. Apart from the fact you were a part-time window cleaner at the time.
Yeah, I was.
They had a show on Planet 24. They had a TV show called Gaytime TV.
That's right.
And,
they did. Yeah, Gaytime. Yeah.
This was back in the day where the sort of typical images about what went on in offices and what was abuse or not will be a young lady leaning over the photocopier, getting her ass pinched as someone walked by. That's exactly what happened to you, Ollie. You were leaning over the photocopier and some person working on Gaytime TV grabbed your ass.
You're absolutely right. I'd forgotten about that. I spent 30 years trying to put that out of my mind. Yeah, that's right. Gaytime TV.
The look of indignation on your face when you turned round and you had no idea who it was.
The thing is, actually, the guy that did that, you remind me, he was a nice bloke. Yeah. He was a nice guy. And it was just, you know what? I mean, so what, really? The vicar tried it on a lot worse when I was a nipper. He got short shrift. But that guy at Gaytime was actually quite a nice bloke. But the thing is, these days, I mean, we're taking all this way, way too seriously, yeah? Simon has been coming up with a 5-year plan, where we're going to be 5 years from now. Are we going to... You tell me, Si. I mean, in terms of this, everybody is walking around like they've got a pencil up their arse or something. Where are we going? Are we going to all become total Presbyterians or what?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I saw an article earlier today on what's happened in history where there's been this very strong moral high ground taken, and it doesn't always end well. Puritanism didn't end particularly well because I think the issue is when people think that they know better than anyone else, that they're unassailable, right? In their moral view, and they always get taken down. But it's like right now, it's like I find it really fascinating what is going to happen. For example, the most obvious thing in the news at the moment is, of course, Black Lives Matter and racism and everything. And we might all look at that from the inside looking out and say, well, it's actually nothing to do with racism. It's to do with Marxism and everything else, and trying to take over, the destruction of the Western society, etc.com, tedious bore. But it doesn't really matter, does it? If there's enough noise created from the Black Lives Matter end of things, which is where there's a very strong moral crusading element put across, where effectively it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. It becomes de facto what's going on in the world. And I was sort of thinking about it, and perhaps like Nigel Farage, I'll get sacked immediately for saying it, but a lot of this stuff, to me, it really does. I was trying to research what went on with Hitler in the 30s and the general patterns of activity that went on. So you had moral outrage, you had, the creation of an enemy, then you had pretty aggressive people on the streets causing trouble, then you had a very strong point of view, and it kind of hit a groundswell of opinion, which then large companies like Heinkel and BMW and people like that were on side with. And it's exactly the same thing going on now, isn't it? It's like Tetley Tea.
I tell you, it seems to me that we've got, it's a bit like the Hitler Youth in terms of the indoctrination, the conditioning of a lot of these people. And I don't think that they really know or even care what they're protesting for. These Black Lives Matter people, for example.
No, of course they don't. Like, what were you like when you were 18? I was organising parties for anti-apartheid, and it was just an excuse to have a party and try and get laid, or go to London.
They seem to want to have a ruck and to, I don't know, get their knives out. I mean, it is. I am a bit frightened. Hold on a sec. We've got Carl Millench who's popped in. We've an early caller, Carl, if you want to unmute and you can tell us what you think. God bless you, mate. I haven't heard from you for a while. I don't know, Si. I mean, it does seem to me that we have got a massive cultural upheaval going on. But these folks protesting and what have you, I don't think they particularly even know who George Soros is, let alone the fact that he and people like him are funding Black Lives Matter and Antifa, you know?
Yeah. Well, that was one of my questions about what's going to happen in 5 years' time. And one of those is Antifa going to exist? Because they've really lost their way. They're just being seen as a bunch of pathetic losers in balaclavas at the moment. You know, a couple of years ago, they were like the rising force, right? But these days, they're like nothing. So,
well, I think they're dangerous, no? I mean, if it's true, I've been seeing these images on Twitter, for example, of people going up to loads of bricks that have been put on the streets in cities around the United States. There have been deliveries of bricks just before the protests. Presume this was going back about 3 weeks now or so. Apparently it happened in Canada as well. And so they've got themselves all their kind of, you know, their weaponry to chuck at the police and all the rest being delivered on tap. It seems that the kind of chaos that we're seeing at the moment has been largely organised. And that side of things, it just isn't being covered by the mainstream media, for example.
Oh, of course it isn't. What do you think, Carl? I can see. Here we go.
Can you hear me now?
Carl.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Carl. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
How are you, mate?
Good evening, Ollie.
We were much better behaved on the first anniversary of supposed of the referendum, weren't we? On the 23rd of June in London, we were much better behaved when we were saying just get Brexit done.
There's a way of behaving properly and being a gentleman or a lady, isn't there? And to see so many people go out protesting and counter-protesting in the major cities, and you can see these cities being locked down now, it's the people who live in the cities who are going to suffer these lockdowns when most people travel into protest. Black Lives Matters were in Coventry 3 weeks ago. They are looking at having Coventry being closed down themselves, aren't they? So, sorry, Leicestershire, not Coventry, Leicestershire. And that's being closed down. Now, not just saying it's Black Lives Matters, but it's people not taking common sense. And when we've been to a protest and there's been a lot of people there and we behaved respectfully. Most of Black Lives Matters has been done 95% respectively. With respect, it's only a small minority which has ruined the cause of what it's meant to be, not politically.
Should it even be necessary, though?
I don't understand why the police, the government, are allowing the Black Lives Matter movement to have these protests. Yet they have a right to protest. I understand that. With the coronavirus going on, they're complaining about the vets going down there. Some right-wing, slightly far right-wing people. You've got the Football Lads Alliance going down there. And they're complaining more about them going down there to protect the monuments and to protect their own pride, I suppose.
And the veterans. The veterans were given a really hard time around the cenotaph a few Saturdays back by the police.
And led into the Lion's Den and being told...
and then being told that they would be charged with terrorism if they didn't leave the cenotaph that they were protecting their fallen brothers in arms. I don't know. I mean, Si, you tell me, should it even be necessary to be talking about Black Lives Matter? Are we not more advanced than that? A little bit like, I don't know, to me, I personally think that gay pride is a bit of a joke. It's like, why do you have to rub it in our faces? I don't care. And is it not the same deal with Black Lives Matter? Surely all lives matter. Isn't that where we should be?
Racist. You know that all lives matter is apparently a racist comment. I mean, but look, the whole thing is ludicrous, right? You know, what you're saying about gay pride. I find that pretty weird because, like, a couple of years ago, I was living in Los Angeles and I was working for a company that was completely dominated by gay men. And and they were so rude about lesbians, and they were so like anti what do they call them? Anti-queer, I think it was. But basically, you know, there's a sort of
They can be very
alpha gay
bitchy. They
man
can be very
who's
bitchy.
strong and muscular and fit and intelligent and really achieving well in society.
Yeah.
And then they have some other words. I think I can't remember what the exact word is. I'm really sorry. I'm honestly not trying to be and in the least bit offensive because I really don't know the word. But they were so rude about certain other types of gay men for their own reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But then,
and it's funny. It's funny. I mean, that is, for example, classic humour, isn't it? Taking the piss. I think
the whole thing's very funny. You know, you have to laugh. And when I was a kid, like, I thought that religion and racism would be kind of gone. Like when I was about 8 years old, it seemed like going to church it's like anyone with any brains realizes that atheism is a lot more sensible than Christianity. And you don't need to wear that ruffle around your neck, or if you do, then it's your choice. Yeah. And I thought that racism was sort of dead and buried and wasn't a thing, and that Lenny Henry had made a joke about it on a sitcom in the 70s, and that was it. And it's just, I find the whole thing really quite perplexing and genuinely, I shouldn't say this, but quite amusing. The fact that it is all so in our face these days, because it seems so ridiculous, the whole thing. Like racism seems stupid, you know, as stupid as, to me, organized religion. But somehow it's being co-opted and turned into the driving force of modern politics. And somehow it's become the driving force of what big corporations think as well. And it just...
I was going to ask, actually, do you think that politics is becoming a kind of, or intolerance even, is becoming a kind of religion? At least in terms of the feverishness.
Well, absolutely. Because if you think about what is the difference between religion and philosophy, for example, is religion is based on dogma, and there's some guy in a dress or whatever telling you what to think, and you take his word as gospel, literally, gospel truth. Whereas any form of intellectual thought is basically based on somebody asking you, what is your opinion? And being given a series of facts and being asked to develop an opinion from it. And the way the world is now at the moment is it's dogma, and people are being given what to think without any opportunity to actually examine it themselves and decide whether there's any logic to it or not. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah. Carl, what about you? What do you think about that? Do you think... I mean, people need to calm down, yeah?
I have a bit more of a chilled out way of looking at things, don't I?
I know you do.
And I was meant to originally come on this show and talk about statues, and I just said I had to comment with you, and I said, well, I think people should have the right, if they want to, remove the statues democratically. And we never managed to get on this show for that. And you had about 4 people on it. But I found some interesting facts just looking into that. It's all perception, isn't it? It's how you look at the media being given to you and how you perceive it and accept it. Now, only you as an individual can accept that, whether you want to call it a theory, conspiracy, or anything else. It's up to you as an individual, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's the colour of your skin. But one thing has come very clear to me is the elites of upper classes who are controlling the media, the papers, the TV, they are using your colour of your skin, your colour and your creed against you and against your fellow people. They're using politics against you. even down to your sexuality against you. So we were talking about the police before. Well, why are the police putting rainbows on their cars? As a Christian and a Jewish person, it was the floods of Noah, and it was the rainbow. It was one of the very early signs of Christianity, and they've taken that as a gay organization covering many different factions of that gay organization.
Yeah.
And they've made a rainbow. Now, there's a lot of Christians who find that very offensive.
Really? I didn't know that, actually. Wow.
But the rainbow was to do of the great floods with Noah. It's about new life. It's about a new beginning.
Because I kind of imagine that the Pride organization, somebody in the branding department of the Pride organization is probably sitting there thinking, these flipping school children and their support the NHS business, drawing rainbows and putting it in the window. You know, that's kind of taken the rainbow away from them, hasn't it? So you're saying that the first time the rainbow has been nicked.
I'm not saying the first time, but as a symbolism for Christianity, as early Christianity, the rainbow was from Noah, because it was Noah had the ark with the floods. Whether you agree it was the whole world or just that continent what got flooded, that's another thing altogether. But it did happen.
Have we, I want to ask you, gentlemen, have we totally failed in terms of democracy in the Western world now? Is that basically what's happened? Democracy
we failed as mankind and being humane.
Chaos as a result.
Olly? That's a bit of a broad, sweeping statement.
Well, I mean, our political leaders, have they listened to us? Have they basically been in touch with the people? Have they kind of gone their own way and people are now taking up, doing their own thing? Or how much of this is manipulated? I'm just wondering what we can learn from where we are now to being where we're going to be in 5 years' time.
Where are we? Well, when's it ever been any different?
Yeah, 2,000 years ago, Jesus, whether you believe he was the Messiah or not, kicked down the gambling tables and the money laundering in the temple. And he said, this is the house of God. You can't do that here. And back in the day, the Jewish scribes were actually paid by the Romans and put in place to make sure they could control the Jewish people. So it has happened. That was 2,000 years ago, if you believe in time scale.
Are you an ecclesiastical scholar?
No, I'm just a normal person who's a bit irritating.
But Olly, I think human nature is always the same. There's always a group, a cabal or whatever you want to call it, that wants to take control and to influence the lives of other people and use them to their own ends. I think the main difference with today is that communication is so much freer. And you're allowed to create. You're allowed to, through an uncontrolled medium of communication, relatively uncontrolled, like Twitter or YouTube. You're allowed to form your own opinion, but obviously that's a double-edged sword because the stuff going into your ear hole is not monitored or doesn't have.
Simon, why the rush, Simon, in making everything happen so quickly? For example, pulling down statues. Franco's 1939 to 1975. The last statue removed of Franco was 2008. That's 33 years after his death. The one in Madrid was moved in 2005. It was never a quick progress of let's pull all these statues down. I understand why they want to remove them, but it was never a quick progress. So why have they picked up so quick now, wanting to have an agenda pulling these statues down? Adolf Hitler never had a statue made of himself. I'm sure it was because he looked too much like Charlie Chaplin, but it was never an imagery of Adolf Hitler. But yet the next government coming in, democratically elected, chose to remove all the memorabilia and anything of statue to that regime. And they democratically choose to do that. In Shrewsbury, where I live, they wanted to take away Clive of India. He wasn't very good with India. He helped to kill a lot of people who lived there by about 50% if you go and look at what he did in his time, but he died early. There was a petition to actually pull them down. And 2,500 people had signed it. And this was 10 days ago when I looked at this. But there was another petition going against it to keep him was 2,200. When you look at Bristol, it was Colston, and they put him in the river. They actually asked people locally, what do you want to do with him? And only 20% of people wanted to take the statue down. The other 80% chose to keep him, yet they still pulled the statue down and threw him in the river. Complete wanton destruction. Never mind looking at the cenotaphs where they're prepared to vandalise them. And when you talk with people who like the ideology of this Black Lives Matters, and they're saying, well, it's just spray paint, you can clean it. It's a cenotaph. I was always taught that's a gravestone. So why is the punishment not the same? If I went into a graveyard and started to defecate people's gravestones, regardless of race, colour, or anything else, I'd be put away. So why is it not the same thing with the cenotaph? That is the dead memorial to all soldiers.
Yeah, I know. People just haven't got any respect. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it? They don't seem to have any respect. I mean, the youngsters or whatever, and there isn't enough cultural inclusion. I don't know. I don't know whether it's as bad where you are in Bath, Si, but in London, it seems to me.
Ollie, did you have any respect? Did you have any respect when you were whatever age?
I did.
Yes.
I mean, not 100%. I was a punk, I suppose. What it was, green hair and stuff. But nonetheless, I did. I wouldn't have just, I certainly wouldn't have somehow desecrated the cenotaph, anything like that. No. I wouldn't have gone around stabbing people or, throwing acid in people's faces and stuff like that. And I would have certainly respected elderly people.
You know what I'd actually be up for, Ollie? When they're on about recruiting young people into the army like they're doing throughout Europe, and France done it, they haven't got a choice. You've got to do your time. Greece has been the same. Spain's been the same. You've got to spend your time as a kid. Well, I'm not saying the kids here should go into the army and take that way of doing it, but why can't they actually maintain the cenotaphs and go out making nice gardens? If the kids are young and your community is actually helping them to create what they can grow up and to see, they're going to look after it naturally, aren't they? But we have a society today where no one's looking after the neighbours anymore.
Yeah, but they got to care about it in the first place.
You help them create it when they're younger, they will care about it the rest of their lives. But the whole part of our country, the way it's going, is we're not doing that anymore. We're not creating it for them to look after it, to appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to change tack because I know that Richard's had a few ideas on things that he wanted to talk about tonight. Yeah. And I wonder, Simon, if you would prefer to have a more light-hearted approach to what's going on because you feel the need for philosophy before we get into some of these very amusing points, I might say.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it was Jerome K. Jerome or someone like that who said, you've got to laugh, haven't you? Because like about 30 years ago, I decided there was just no point reading the news because it was just really always depressing and very negative. And if I think about my life in general, you start off life, you're always being told to be terrified about something, right? So you start off life being terrified about nuclear war. And what was it after that? When I was like 16 or something, I was convinced I had AIDS. Yeah. And it's just all this sort of racism stuff and whatever. To me, it's just the latest wave of some manipulative group somewhere trying to tell you what to do and control you. Mm-hmm. But as to Carl's point earlier, then in terms of society and the lack of society and the lack of people caring each other, I know this sounds very Morrissey, but I do blame Thatcher for all that kind of thing. The disintegration of society. Didn't she say there is no such thing as society? There is only the individual, or something equally shit like that.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think you've got to be able to laugh at it, Ollie. Otherwise,
I agree.
otherwise you will end up like one of those grumpy old men who's constantly red in the face, shaking, staring at the news.
I already am.
Attacking somebody, right? Attacking some type of person on the news that you don't like.
Been like that for 10 years.
Is that all?
Yes. Yeah. No, I hear you. And you've got to laugh.
It's like if you're on your deathbed, right? If you're on your deathbed, are you going to wish you'd spent more time railing against the invisible force of the world over which you have no control or limited control? Or are you going to wish you'd spent a bit more time with your sort of Guinness pint full of emotional energy, thinking about how you spent that energy to help people you care about? Or if you're not happy with your own life, with how you live, how much money you've got, or whatever like that, are you going to like project that into like a dissatisfaction with the forces around you, the people that you don't like? And I've been very guilty of that in the past. I mean, like when I was living in London, I was living in Shepherd's Bush, and I wasn't happy with that situation at all. And in there, you're basically surrounded by militant Islamists, and so it's very easy to sort of think about blaming them for things that you don't like or whatever that's going on. But I'm sure
it's either them or BBC
right?
employees up the road. They've all gone now, haven't they?
Have?
Yes. So does that mean that you feel a middle-aged gentleman? You feel helpless at being able or not to shape events in any way whatsoever in this?
Well, that's a really important question, Ollie, in terms of human existence. It's like as you get older and you lose your physical prime, and you're no longer the alpha male searching for the young female or whatever gender you prefer, and you're not in that race anymore. And if you haven't established yourself as the leader of your own particular pack, so you're not the mayor of Barcelona or whatever, it's like, your moral and physical and mortal decline starts to begin, and you start to feel aches in the morning, and you get rheumatism or whatever it is. It's like, how do you react with that? Do you start sort of moaning about the world and your position in the world? And do you start blaming other people for the fact that you're actually declining and you're a member of the mortal species? I don't know. I think the best thing you can do is just try and laugh about it, because
Simon, on the other side, Simon, you've got it where when we had families when we were younger, i.e. my parents were pregnant with the first, I suppose, when they were 17 and 19.
Wow.
And I'm one of 5. I had my first child, and the only one, unless anybody else wants to admit it. I was 27. Most people are having families now at 30, but by the time you go for the rigmarole of trying to pay your finances, to pay your mortgage, and I'm 50 now. I woke up 10 years ago, and started to see things how they are, and started to delve in. Met Ollie and other people. Not saying they're all right. There's some of them are left as well, but it gives you an overall view, doesn't it? But by the time you get there, if you're lucky, you're going to be 50, and then you think, well, I've got 20 years of my life left of health in front of me. How the hell am I going to sort something out like this? Because you spend that much time worrying about your kids. I've only had one. My parents had 5. I was one of 5. You spent that much time bringing the kids up and trying to put food on the table and clothing them. You didn't have the time to look at it to realise what's going on until you're older.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess what I meant is that if you imagine an earlier time where, in particular, the male creature survived through his ability to wreak violent havoc on other males and protect his cave or whatever. It's like as you get older, you're less able to do that. And because of the Western paradigm is all based on how much money you've got and all that sort of shit, and how many Facebook friends or whatever, if you don't have all that in ACEs, and you start to physically decline because of your mortality, then people start blaming other people, and they become more conscious about their own relative failings in life. You see it in America, the people who haven't lived up to the American dream, they're fucking nightmares. They're absolutely awful. They're dreadful people to be.
Si, have you tried Prozac?
I'm all right, mate. I've got CBD.
I don't mean Prozac, do I? What's that thing you take to keep your willy up?
Viagra.
Viagra. There you go. Get some Viagra, mate. And then you can go on a protest.
Get your pecker up. Oh, dear.
It's okay.
Okay, all right. You do have some interesting, salient points regarding this, which I want to bring up, because you're quite concerned about the future role. Not that I'm changing the subject or moving it on, about sex bots.
Yeah.
So what 5 years from now, never mind, global tyranny, Chinese control state, with, I don't know, George Soros is still alive, and Henry Kissinger is, God knows how much baby's blood he's consumed by then. Never mind all of that. What is the concern with sex bots that you have?
My concern with sex bots, it's connected to my concern with pornography, and to a lesser degree, my concern with public toilets and gender identity. It's like so my nephews and my niece, we got really stoned about a month ago and talked about porn, and they're like 20, 21, 22, that sort of age. And they just basically admitted that they'd grown up with pornography as their idea of what any form of, never mind like flirtation or getting to know anyone, or, the thrill of the chase or any of that. That was all irrelevant.
No,
it was all like council flat, direct light, cheap mattress, and all of the typical things that happen in porn movies. And then on top of that, you've got the sex bot thing, which in
so Japan, there's no romance. There's no romance, basically. You're saying
there's no romance, and there's no, I don't know, there's no reciprocal activity, shall we say? It's all just one-sided. It's all quite brutal.
Really, no.
It's all very physical.
So they really are. They really are. Because I haven't really spoken to any young people about this.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of my nephew told me that basically for him, he assumed that sex was about zero interest in the woman's pleasure, and then wanking himself into her face. He thought that was what sex was all about, because he'd just seen it hundreds and hundreds of times on porn videos since about the age of 9 online.
When people wonder the dangers of listening to BBC News, it's not a dissimilar deal, yeah? It is a similar kind of conditioning to, I don't know, YouPorn or whatever, no?
It's
news porn, as opposed to smacking God knows what, up, all that.
Yeah, but you see, on top of that, so I know this is slightly tangential, but like
That's
about
right.
30 years ago, I was living on an Indian reservation in the States, and with a couple of Japanese guys and a bunch of IRA wannabe Irish guys, doing some charity stuff. And I remember this Japanese guy, Fumi, his name was. He was very, very upset when he went into the shower, because there were these sort of, very tall Irish lads and whatever who were very sort of boisterous and pushing each other around and things. And his sort of cautious approach to life, he was very conservative and things. He found it very, very hard to deal with, because he'd led a very conservative life, and then all of a sudden we were all living in a teepee on an Indian reservation, and we were all being covered in mud and getting pushed, and he was getting pushed into the middle of this shower with these very noisy Irish guys, and he didn't know what to do. So if you imagine that kind of person being assailed online with all sorts of wild pornography and all sorts of artificial imagery of women plastering themselves in makeup so that they look literally unreal on Instagram and position themselves as being hyper creatures. They're not real people, and everything's controlled, and all the messages they give, and it's all very controlled and very unreal. And it must feel very, very difficult if you're somebody who hasn't been brought up to the sort of boisterous nature of American cockiness, so to speak, to be able to interact. And you could probably feel that you lose a lot of confidence in terms of actually dealing with real people.
Yeah.
So to me, when you think about Japanese culture being so work orientated and conservative and all the rest of it, it cannot be a coincidence that that's where most of the sex bots are sold as well. And that there's a lot of guys, young guys, who claim that they don't want anything to do with women, real women, because why should they? Like, you know, they don't have to pay for them, they don't have to talk to them, they don't have to deal with them having opinions and things like that, because the images that they've grown up with are this sort of, you know, weird anime manga images, weird Japanese pornography and things, and then from over the pond in the States, they've had this hypersexualized imagery presented to them from the States and things, and it's like the idea of actually dealing with a real woman and things is probably really, really like a lot more challenging for them than it would have been for you or I when we were younger. I mean, not when you were working Planet 24 and Gay Time TV was there. That was probably more of a challenge. You know, you were very attractive, but not so much to the girls, right? Because the guys loved you.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, the guys always just to try and hit on me. It's true.
It's understandable.
Especially at Planet 24. Something to do with the culture there. But, okay, so you're saying, or the supposition that I have from that is that we are leading into sort of a sexually, incompetent society globally, perhaps, but particularly maybe in places like Japan, where their porn is pretty weird. Yeah, it is. We're going into this situation where people, a sex doll is going to be a more typical partner.
Yeah, a lot easier to deal with, right? You know, like
there is a front page story on Drudge today. I'll look it up. Well, you carry on. I'll look it up. But they are saying pretty much exactly that, actually. Carry on, Si. Carry on. I'll find the story.
On Drudge, okay. Well, that's clearly a reliable piece of information.
Yeah, no, I know. I can't stand it either. I can't stand Drudge anymore. But nonetheless, I did see this thing on there.
There's a podcast called Sword and Scale, which is one of these true crime ones. And about 5 months ago, they had this piece on this incel, if you know what an incel is.
No, what's an incel? What's an incel?
An involuntarily celibate person.
Right.
And basically, you get these people on Instagram, male or female, but probably, I think, more female than males, who develop they put all these images of themselves on Instagram, which are hypersexualized, unreal, you know, perfectly formed, you know, no bags under their eyes, anything like that. And they have this group of people around them who are, I think they're called orbiters, who know that they are never ever going to meet this person, but they still worship them. You know, they have a glamour put upon them in the same way that Dracula put like a glamour on his victims in the original novel. And they know they're never going to meet this person. And for that kind of person, it's easier.
Simon, are you saying they're fixated on the avatar they created then?
They're fixated on the online
avatar.
Yeah, but they find it easier to deal with that online unreality and probably go and wank off in the shower later than it is to deal with a real human being. And that becomes habitual over time, and as a result, they become this thing called an incel, which is an involuntarily celibate person who, I mean, you know, Morris.
Oh, so they're inverted sexually.
It's a bit like there are these people that go online, and honestly, this isn't me. They go on. They all dress up as animals, don't they? They put on,
furries.
long tail. Hey?
Furries.
Furries. Yes.
Yeah.
Furries. Yes. Yes. Friend of this show actually told me he was a furry. I'm not going to say who he was. Lovely bloke. Really lovely bloke. But this is a kind of, I don't know. There seems to be, but this is a kind of like a, what is it? Manga type. It's another kind of a fantasy world, isn't it? For people to go off on a kind of a sexual direction, no?
Well, it's all part of the same thing, right? Which is an abstraction away from real life and the visceral physical existence and the way you communicate with a human into it just more and more abstract ways of communicating and existing with each other in general.
Right.
So, not to sound too old, but it's, I remember about 10 years ago, my flipping nephews texting each other from across the room, sitting in the same room, texting each other. And me being an old fucker, thinking, what the fuck are they doing? They're like texting each other and they're in the same room. Why don't they just talk to each other?
Yeah.
But I just realized it was all like endemic. And it's something about human nature. When I was a kid, there was a joke about tourists, again, Japanese tourists mainly, like always taking photographs. So they're always taking a picture of where they are, and they're not engaging with the real world. They're everything that you're.
That's right. What is it with all this selfie stuff? Hold on. Let me just read you this briefly. Go on, Si. Sorry. No. Let me just read you this. Hold that thought. Let me just read you this because it's very relevant, and we're bound to fly off on a tangent any minute. This is this was a link from Drudge, but it's the Daily Star. They love sex bots on the Daily Star. Yeah, they love sex bots. I've noticed that. But anyway, sex robots will, and Drudge always has the links as well. Matt Drudge for you. Sex robots will fundamentally change human existence after revolutionary upgrades. A new book, Sex, Robots and Vegan Meat, has explored the world of sex robots. Its author, Jenny Kleeman, claims they are set to have a big impact on society thanks to human-like features. Sex robots are poised to redefine the fundamental elements of our existence, according to a new book. A new book is, I mean, not really anything we don't know, is it? I mean, I'm not going to show any more of that. It is a worry, isn't it? It is a worry if we're getting to the stage as a society where we can't, meet a nice person and have a few laughs and have some real. Instead of which, it's all just so fake.
Yeah, but actual human connection, and it.
Yeah, that's the one.
As Carl was saying earlier, communities don't really exist so much anymore, and neighbours and people don't support each other anymore. So there's a flaw in the human condition, right? That there's on one side of the human condition, we're really good at talking to each other, and we're really good at collaborating in a way that monkeys can't, which is why we're on top and they're not, apart from the opposable thumb, and we're really good at that. But we create this technology, which one of the key things it does, apart from making our lives easier, it pushes us apart from each other, and that flaw that we've got, that sort of whatever it is, that competitiveness or the desire to fuck other people over, even if it's not conscious or whatever. Technology really enables it. And so, back in the 70s, it was like, oh, don't talk to the neighbors anymore. And these days, it's don't talk to anybody anymore. No, of course I don't want a girlfriend, because a robot's way more compatible and a lot easier to deal with. And then I can be my own narcissistic weirdo. Like narcissism, when I was a kid, narcissism wouldn't have got you anywhere in life.
Yeah, that's right.
You can become a politician.
These days, it's a huge, if you're a narcissist or a sociopath, it's like a route to success.
Well, you say that. It didn't appear to get you anywhere. But actually, I think it did get a lot of people of our generation, Simon, Carl, very, very far indeed. look at some of our former prime ministers, for example. I mean, I seriously wonder if the rumours about Blair being a deviant psycho were the reason that he was recruited at Oxford, ultimately to destroy Labour and socialism, as was, with Clause 4 and all, and then become the prime minister, and doesn't give a stuff. Off the back of Iraq, you've got Ali Campbell on Twitter right now, almost guaranteed, tweeting any minute how many coronavirus deaths there are at the hands of this government. And he's responsible, his sexed up dossier, for 1 million dead in Iraq. I think that psychos have been doing very, very well for a long time, provided they went to the right school.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think, but you can always laugh about it, right? Because I think, what did Blair say at the time? He said, "This isn't the time for sound bites, but I feel the hand of history upon my shoulder."
Yeah, that was Northern Ireland, wasn't it? The Good Friday.
Yeah, it's so funny. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I guess narcissism for me, the reason I think it's so successful in the modern era is because of the internet. But
yeah,
I might be
selfie sticks. Right. Okay. 2025. So far it's looking, well.
Let's get back to basics, Ollie. So where's my little crib sheet? 2025. Do you think you're going to be alive in 2025?
What, me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would assume so.
What sort of state do you think?
If I haven't been knocked off by, I don't know, some dodgy civil war or something like that going on, yeah, I'd have thought so.
Do you think you're going to be like secure, feeling safe in society, or do you think society will change enough?
Harder to say. Might be farming potatoes.
Okay.
Time for bail in, not bail out.
I mean, today, for example, we saw it. How many jobs lost in the UK today? We've got this coronavirus thing. Nobody's talking about the origin of it, really. Apparently you're a conspiracy theorist if you bother to moot that it may have come out of a lab in Wuhan, despite the fact that the democratically elected leader of the Western world has been mooting precisely that. Apparently, his intel is no good and we're all conspiracy theorists, according to, The Independent, anyway, and the BBC. But the deal with the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever, the really, really big worry, because it's killed, 500,000 people? 500,000 people it's killed. There's 150,000 people that die on this planet each and every day. Yeah. So actually, I don't know whether it's right to call it a pandemic, but the pandemic we have got is a poverty pandemic. That is on the way and it's starting. And we actually saw just today, for example, a bunch of different blue chip businesses have said, we're laying off. I mean, it's happening. It's happening. The poverty off the back of this crisis is happening. So in terms of 5 years from now, where unless there is this remarkable, miraculous V curve, I don't know how that's going to happen, frankly.
It won't.
Sorry. And the other thing is, with robots, technology, we've got loads of migration coming in. The UN, there's this migration agreement now where basically they don't want any borders whatsoever. That thing that Theresa May signed in Marrakesh, which the BBC never talks about. We've got a real problem now with a hefty population, and we're all about to lose our jobs either because of COVID or because of robots.
Ollie,
well, yeah.
Am I still on it?
Hey?
You what?
Can you hear me?
Go on, Carl.
The problem they've got is local lockdown. When you've got local places like Leicestershire and stuff, and they go, we're going to close this area down. When you've got massive populations of people in London, Manchester, Birmingham, all throughout the world, but the major cities, these are the big dense populations, they're going to close them down. If they're going to have problems with coronavirus, which they reckon is going to be a second peak or a third peak, then it's the cities what are going to be closed down. It's not the small regional places, the small villages. It's the big cities, and that's where the institutions are.
Well, that's what they're saying, but there's people that are on the news today in, is it Leicester that's been locked down? Saying,
I do think it is, yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it. I don't know anybody. A couple of people I heard today saying this from Leicester.
They've closed down all the shops, Ollie. So anybody who's got a local shop there in that area, all the shops, they've bought all the drinks and all the food and everything else to cater for the people and been put down on a 2-week or more lockdown.
So basically,
they've got produce is going to go to rot. Yeah.
Unless you're Jeff Bezos or some internet king, you're screwed.
So what happens when it happens with Manchester, Birmingham, or London? And these are major financial centres. How are they going to lock down London?
I don't know. Si, where do you see this 5 years from now? Can we recover?
The lockdown thing, the poverty.
Yeah, the poverty trap that we're literally just beginning. People I don't think it's really registered. Well, probably with a lot of people it has now, but only just really.
No, you're right. I mean, but what's his name? Sunak has been sort of hinting that there's going to be a massive recession for a while. So it's been drip fed into us that we're about to hit a major recession. And then, of course, you've got the Brexit doom-mongers who think that that's going to make things even worse as well. I mean, my own personal view on this whole lockdown business is it's not going to get taken seriously in the future because, ultimately, we're really lucky in terms of disease. This is not the Black Death. It's not Spanish flu. It's not Ebola. It's not like people are dropping dead left, right, and center. A few people are getting sick, but the similar types of people who are dying are typically the similar types of people who are dying on an annual basis from influenza, apart from
tuberculosis. 1.5 million people died from that last year. Jay Carey put up a tweet about that earlier.
Never mind who died of cancer because they processed too much processed meat. I think people are just going to lose interest in it, and the government's going to come up with some sort of story that actually lockdown isn't that big a deal because they can't just keep going right. They can't just keep locking down when there's a new wave of the thing. They're going to have to come up with a new story, and you can already see Boris kind of hinting at it a bit, right? Which is that first of all, he says the scientific view is this, even though the scientific view at the time from Imperial College was people allegedly say was on an ancient piece of software that was completely unreliable and didn't give the same result twice. But there was that day where he decided to go against the public trust, and he suddenly decided that he was going to put all his money into what the scientists were saying. And I kind of think that maybe that's because he could imagine the ghost of Jeremy Corbyn rising from his grave. Rise from your grave. And calling him a mass murderer when people died if he didn't follow that scientific advice. But now it's like he's leaning the other way, right? And he's now leaning towards sort of trusting the public a bit more. And I'm pretty sure that within a few months there will be new massive waves of coronavirus. But
Simon, he's on a win-win, isn't he?
Sorry?
He's on a win-win.
You reckon?
So, yeah, because it was originally estimated there's going to be 250,000 plus deaths, and there's been 45,000 and less. So he's on a win-win. There's been a fifth or a quarter of the deaths estimated to start with. Haven't we done a great job? We spent all this money and we've stopped all these people from dying. And you're right. People with lung problems, 140,000 people die a year just from emphysema and lung problems. And there's only been 40,000 to 45,000 people with these deaths with coronavirus linked, because not all of them been tested either. It'd be interesting to see what will happen in a year's time when we can see how many people have died from lung infections who have died from cancer infections which weren't corona linked, and to actually look that back at past statistics and to see if their death rate has dropped because they've claimed it to be corona.
I just find the whole thing a bit abstract. I mean, I don't know how many people die on the road every year through road accidents, but nobody shuts down the roads because people die on the road.
Yeah,
I don't quite get the connection with what's going on and the need to lock down the entire economy. I mean, not to say it isn't horrible on an individual basis. One of my best friends nearly died of it, and that was horrible. But it just doesn't connect logically with the way we treat other diseases. And
to lose 20% of the GDP, which we have through this virus, from what the government's done, is losing all profit from the last 17 years of growth in the country.
Is it? Wow.
Yes, and that's 20%. That's 17 years of growth gone. And that's never mind the debt you got to pay back yet.
But it all seems to be around this strapline that they came up with to protect the NHS, and that's all because of Neil Ferguson.
If we were meant to be protecting the old folk, we wouldn't be putting them back in the old folks' homes where they were dying quicker.
Yeah.
No, and we should protect old folks.
It was all meant to be protecting the older people being more vulnerable.
Right.
It's just not been that way.
I want to take a few comments, see what people have got to say, and then we will pick that up exactly there, Carl and Simon, because I know Si has been made some points about deep fakes and what we can believe as well. But before we get into that, Libel or Libel, hey Libel, says TB, tuberculosis, and a few other nasties have returned when Angela Merkel opened the gates of Europe. Kenneth Noel Curran says the 1st of August 2020, London campaigners against child abuse gatherings to give a voice for children abused and exploited, UK and elsewhere. The downliner, yes, but the reference is to the outbreak of 2018, referring to tuberculosis, I think. No masks, no economy destruction, no lockdown, etc. And apparently in 2018, there were 1.5 million dead from tuberculosis. Where was that, downliner Jay? Was that globally? Just let me know in the comments. Stuart Firth, since approval of abortion in the UK in 1967 to 2014, 8,745,508, I guess, aborted fetuses, Stuart is saying. Amanda Rolfson says, I was reading whilst at the doc surgery 2 years ago how tuberculosis and hepatitis had risen 75%, all down to these people being allowed to roam here they want with their health unchecked. And William Davis, there never been a COVID virus. Just as an aside, Dr. Faustus Fauci over stateside.
He's got a big one, hasn't he? Big virus.
Yeah. Exactly so. Yeah. He reckons that the next one coming along, being developed in the lab now, sir, is a swine flu thing, pig virus. Again, he says it's going to come out of China. They told us, didn't they? Haven't they told us this? Gates told us a few years ago. I've got it in the oven, just heating it up. Yeah. We're about to release it. And these people, they've got links to that lab. They've both invested money, have links with that lab. Bill Gates is the biggest independent funder of the WHO, and the WHO apparently is owned by China, who apparently own the UN and does all their human rights stuff. Oh yeah, great, makes sense. Okay, we're told. So as I mentioned earlier, we're told we must believe the official narrative about where this COVID-19 came from, despite the fact that it's a totalitarian state. We're supposed to believe what you are asking the question in 2025. Will we believe anything? Maybe you'd like to answer your own question.
Well, I think, will we believe anything that will we truly believe anything? Is going to be a very difficult question, isn't it? Because if you watch enough what's his face, Paul Joseph Watson on YouTube, you probably believe him, and then you stop believing everyone else. Or the same with Tucker Carlson on Fox, and then if you watched enough CNN, you'll probably believe that. I used to think that I used to have this like piece of wood in the corner of my room, and I used to think if I prayed to that enough, I'd start thinking it was a god, and I'd believe in it, even though it was a bit of wood I put there myself. So I think what you choose to believe. I think people will believe things. I think the main problem is that nobody will truly know if it's really true or not.
Mm-hmm.
Truth is kind of going out the window a bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely, big time.
It's so easy to prove something patently untrue as looking true, and with this whole new sort of dogma, mainly from the left, probably from the right as well, there is no requirement to even question it or understand if it's true or not. You're just told that you are a rebel against that particular cause, so you're a racist or you're intolerant or you're a lefty or whatever if you don't immediately accept what's given to you in that particularly aggressive manner.
Yeah.
So it's like it doesn't me. It feels like there isn't going to be any real truth anymore. Money's not real. Religion isn't real. Politics isn't trustworthy. The internet, which is our main channel of communication, is faked up to the nuts. There's nothing. And if you don't spend any of your time actually with somebody in front of you physically, somebody close to you physically, emotionally, and if you have no intimacy with anybody in the world, then nothing's true, really, is it? You can have too much coffee and the whole world becomes unreal. So fuck knows what you then do when you start reading too much Twitter. It's like, what the fuck is actually real anymore? Because we don't do anything. We don't make anything. We have no connection with our physical bodies and our existence anymore the way we used to. We used to plant things in the ground and there was a connection between physical activity and survival. And that doesn't really exist anymore. And there's no real narrative anymore for the Western world.
The problem I have is when people, you mentioned Paul Joseph Watson, for example, and I like the guy because he's got some good logic to him. But when it comes to facts, people stating facts, whether it's from him or anybody else, if they say, and I'm not saying that he does this, by the way, I'm just, but anybody that says about some sort of fact which has come out of some body, government body or whatever, or some PR company, whatever, if they state that as a fact, 100%, I just don't trust them now. I just don't trust them because there is so much spin. It doesn't matter who says it, where it's coming from, unless they've seen it with their own eyes. I find it very, very different. My trust factor has fallen through the floor.
But you and I were journalists about 150 years ago, Ollie, and even then there was the nascent existence of wires, which is where somebody somewhere writes a story and they put it on a system which then gets distributed. But just by the fact that it's on that system, all the other journalists around read it and then regurgitate it into their own story. Their journalism. So
it is, journalism. Journalism, yeah, good word.
So you can invent anything you want. If you put it in the right media vehicle or the right way for it to be disseminated to a lot of people, it's almost irrelevant if it's true or not, because it's just believed because it's put in front of people on a format which they've got some degree of empathy with, not even trust, but they feel that is part of their lives, that's part of their ritual, that's part of who they are, watching that video, that YouTube channel or whatever. But it doesn't have to be true at all. Certainly not really true. It could be like a grain of truth. The best lies in the world always contain a grain of truth, right? So,
that's right. But it's not about so much truth or facts or not. It's about the way things are spun equally, if not more, And it's about, for example, in terms of the news, the main thing is it's what they leave out. It's the things that they don't talk about, or the things that they prioritize. That's actually the way they create the narrative. And so it's really distraction as opposed to outright lies. And just
they can't make it up, can they? They can't completely invent a mob in.
They did invent the Russians stuff, and they ran it for 3 years. We know that was a complete lie. How many people do you think realize that the BBC and the whole of the mainstream media, near as damn it, was lying to them blatantly about Donald Trump and that Russian story for 3.5 years? How many people do you think of your circle, for example, understand and appreciate or realize that they were being blatantly lied to?
I think probably everybody realizes it wasn't particularly truthful, but it's like hypnotism or something like that. People, it's kind of there, and if you look at it, it's real, and it has a real effect. But there's something in the brain that allows you to just ignore it and just go with the crowd and go with what the accepted narrative is. So
it's very dangerous, though, isn't it? It's very, very dangerous when you're playing with people that, whether or not they were right to vote for the guy or not, whether or not he lied to them on the campaign trail or not, that's another matter. I would personally argue that he didn't, but that's not the point. For the media to, I'm just wondering what of the media's behaviour hasn't been Goebbels-esque.
Well, none of it. It is all that. And what was one of his great lines was related to, if you tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth, right?
Yeah.
That general sort of approach. And it is absolutely true. I think the big problem is that with the modern media is that they just don't get any credible pushback and nobody questions them enough.
Because they're all part of the same club, no? There doesn't seem to be a balance.
No, but it's as if they somehow realize that they really can take the piss to an endless degree, and nobody's going to really question them. It's quite extraordinary.
How dangerous is that? How dangerous? Sorry, Carl. I want to bring you in. I do apologize. How dangerous is that 5 years from now? If we don't, there's a lot of talk, for example, now, defund the BBC. It's gone viral on Twitter. The guy got something like 60,000 people sign up within about 48 hours. There's a lot of people, a lot of big names as well that are getting behind it. What is your prediction of what could happen with the mainstream media and with social media as well? But this is going out, this show now on Facebook, but there won't be more than about 30, 40 people watching it on Facebook between my personal profile and the old Daily Brexit page, now the Daily Chaos News page, for the simple reason that I'm shadow banned constantly on Facebook because they don't like Brexit.
Of course they don't.
What 5 years from now, what predictions would you have in terms of the media? And I include social media in that because it all seems to be part of the same club these days.
Well, that's the big issue. So you and I have never really talked about this, but a few years ago, I got paid a reasonable amount of money to do consultancy on cyber terrorism, and looking into how that all works and the levels of threat that you can get. And the main thing that came out of it is you never really know who your enemy is. It could be anybody because they can be dressing themselves up as something else. And unless you're Putin and you literally invade Crimea, pretending to and not admitting who you are, it's all driven by technology. And if you look at the way technology is now and the way it could be in 5 years' time, there's going to be even less players dominating more people, and they're going to have more control over what those people think. So in general, media, the idea of media being objective, which was absolutely
The Holy
which
Grail.
was really true, right, for a while, but it became a bit of a joke. But that's absolutely disappearing. The idea of media being objective and truthful is gone because of technology. Because it doesn't matter if you're an audience of 3 in Slough. If you're a sort of weird sort of social group in Slough somewhere and there's literally 3 members, it doesn't matter because it's really easy for technology to subvert and pervert its messages in order to give you a particular angle. Whereas 50 years ago, there were millions of copies of the Sun and the Times and the Mirror and whatever all being churned out with a very broad idea as to who they were trying to appeal to, and it was all very generalist, and it was all very trackable, and it was all very easy to work out if somebody was actually being easier to work out if somebody had actually got any facts behind what they were talking about. But these days it's just impossible, and its technology makes it fundamentally easier to lie to people and fundamentally easier to influence them as well.
Butt in, James.
Please do, Carl. Please do, Carl. God bless you, mate.
A couple of things you made up, what you said there. The EU was paying money into the BBC for educational programmes, supportive programmes, and then they promoted them, obviously, in EU agenda. In the last 4 years, has the EU paid into the BBC under the same funding, even though we're meant to be leaving? And when do they stop paying into it?
They give them a grant.
Sorry?
They give them a grant. They have a grant.
Well, it's millions of pounds. It's not just a few.
I'm not sure
quid.
how much.
It's millions of pounds.
Is it?
Yeah.
What per year? It is. Yeah.
Well, it was before. I've not even thought about looking into it. But are they still paying into the BBC, and why?
I don't know that that's the reason that the BBC is so pro EU, though. I think they would be anyway. I think that they basically have to be, else they're not.
They are putting the money for educational purposes. That means programs are being made, and if they like them, they will be aired. So it's in favour of the EU, because obviously they're not going to air something which isn't.
Right. We're running out of time. Fast. And Richards, we haven't really got very far with this. I'm looking through some of your points here, and you've got some fascinating points to talk about. So we're just going to have to do another show. Can we do that?
I don't know. Can you?
Well, I don't know. It depends.
So yeah, there's lots of things. I think when people think about the future and they make predictions and things, there's big ticket items that are fun to talk about, like is there going to be a civil war?
Sex bots.
And then you've got other smaller things which for an individual could actually be far more fundamental. Like let's imagine let's imagine you're identifying right now as a 5-year-old girl. So in 5 years' time, you're 10 years old. And let's imagine a situation for a 10-year-old girl where gender fluidity and gender identity means that there's nothing stopping a sexual predator of either gender identifying as a woman and going into a public toilet and lying in wait for...
Oh, we're going there. Oh, we're there.
That's the sort of thing that's going to be a reality in 5 years from now, I think, unfortunately. Or is it? Or is this sort of intersectionalist whatever views, is it a flash in the pan?
I would have to say, Simon, things like that will probably happen in the major cities before you come out into the sticks or into the farming communities, because things will happen 10, 15, 20 years later with those sort of fashions. It'll be institutionalized within the cities, and therefore they think it's right for the outbanders will do the same thing. But it'll be years later. I live in Mid Wales here, mate. It's a farming community. It's just not going to happen.
You're just going to use pitchforks, aren't you?
It's just what happened, mate. That's it. It's just what happened here.
It went up, which is great, but the relative number of people there who could be affected by it is quite low compared to the number of people, I don't know, in Westminster.
But when you live in major cities, then it'll happen there first. The people in the smaller communities don't actually see it as a threat or a problem.
No. Well, let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of many things that weird things are going to happen over the next few years, right? And, on a personal level, as a kid, I think as a child, it's just going to be a nightmare 5 years from now. Life is going to be really, going to be very difficult. The level of competition to get any kind of job. Never mind, any of this other bullshit going on. It's going to be really difficult. And that's one of the few times in my life I've ever felt quite lucky to be a bit older, and have the first flush of youth well and truly.
Do you think you're turning into a grumpy old man, Si?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, look, just some closing comments here. We've got Libelle, who is talking to Helen Lasky-Smith. God bless you, Helen Lasky-Smith, on the front lines in hospitals and what have you. And she's still hanging in there. Helen says there are talks to forbid, Libelle says there are talks to forbid the sale of vitamin D. Amanda Rolfson, God and Jesus are real. Poisoner X says, love the daily chaos. God bless you, Poisoner. Tell people, mate. I've never seen you here before. Good to see you. And William Davis, Helen Smith, you are a person like myself. Good on you. And Kenneth Noel Cowan, who am I? Who are you? Who are they? Know thyself. That's right. You know what, Si, actually, I think that is pretty much the common denominator of what you're saying tonight, is you're concerned that in 2025, people aren't going to know who the bloody hell they are anymore.
No, they're really not. Because, one of the like when I was a kid, like one of the main ways you got to know yourself is by like things like physical things, right? Like meeting people and talking to them, getting into a fight, feeling the pain of somebody smacking you in the face and telling you that you've got a very punchable face, playing sports at school and things like that. And this is all, the more abstract you get and the more disinformation there is and the more you're told what to think and the more the way in which the messages come to you are distant and aggressive and don't allow any kind of dialogue or any appreciation of what your own personal point of view might be, the harder it is to know who the fuck you are in the first place. But I honestly think that, in the Western world, the fact that we don't actually make anything anymore and that we're heading into this recession is going to be even more of a problem than it used to be. It's already all well and good being a service economy, but what happens when you can't congregate in large groups in cities and service things?
There is a big problem, Simon. There is a big problem with the banking system because we had a bail in and then you got a bail. Well, we had a bail out and they're going to go bail in. It'd be negative equity bank, and that's where they're going to steal all your pensions and your houses off you, and things will be taken away.
That's what they did in Cyprus.
We've never been so close on the banking system, like you're saying, but it's a whole different story, mate. But to go into a negative banking system,
Cyprus,
it's going to be horrendous.
Didn't they? They did that in
stole
Cyprus.
It and said it's just a one-off. Just a one-off.
The EU,
never going to do it again.
The EU, they called it a template. They called it a template.
Yeah, we're only doing it once. We'll never do it again. Yeah, right. Going to negative equity. It's called a bail-in, and it's where anyone who's got assets, and they'll take 20%, 40%, 80%, and after that, they'll go with the houses. And even if you own your house or have a mortgage on it, you only have the right to live there now because you have a register you're on. You actually don't have the legal right and tender to be there.
Wow.
Disturbing. They can sign it over to a corporation when you're shown to do something illegal or something of disrespect to.
That's part of the Coronavirus Act, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. They could do that before, actually, Ollie. When you register a car, you become the legal owner. You become the person who has the right to own that vehicle, to drive it. You own the car when you buy it off the forecourt brand new. As soon as you register it, you surrender the right for ownership and you become the legal guardian of it. And that's what they've done with the housing. So since 1985, when you actually buy a house, if you can buy it outright, you're not given the legalese of the property, of the right to be there. You're given a photocopy of the documents which were surrendered before. So that's held by a corporation, mate. So if you do anything wrong, legally or not, or they see you doing it, they can actually change the document online even before you go to court and do anything about it, mate. It can be taken off you. So you actually don't own your own house once you've paid your mortgage anymore.
Yeah. I got a leasehold on my place, and I've never actually seen the lease.
Well, all mortgages are leased anyway by the government, by the original king or queen who did it, and it was 1,000-year lease. So all these mortgages you're taking it out is a sublet off a mortgage, and after 1,000 years, it can be recalled back to the state anyway.
Wow. I'm going to get a motorhome.
Yeah, that's the one.
But then you've got to pay for the petrol or the diesel.
Well, you get the right Volkswagen, you can actually use cooking oil. So just make sure you get the right one with a filter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they're going to take everything. They're going to knock the whole pension systems out. When they drop the banks this time and go to negative equity, that's everybody. And I've said this before with you, Ollie, for a long time because I've known you. When they actually drop the banks the next time and completely drop them, that's anyone who's got a pension. They've lost it because the banks guarantee those pensions. That's hospitals, nurses, doctors, teachers, firemen, anyone in the army. Anyone who's got an index-linked pension will go if they drop the banks and make it into negative equity. So if you've got cash, buy something of collateral, whether it's in gold, literally gold. Don't buy bonds in gold because it's worthless. But think how we do.
We're going to need to continue this conversation, gentlemen. There is so much surrounding this subject. Pretty much everything that surrounds us. Stuart Firth wants the Dam Busters, but Stuart, it's not going to happen tonight. But it will happen tomorrow.
The Dam Busters.
Yeah.
It is.
Bouncing ball. What's the guy's name who came up with that?
I want to say a big thank you to my special guest, Simon Richards.
I'm special.
Carl, God bless you, mate. Carl first came on Daily Brexit years ago with Lynn Scott. And Carl, Lynn
Scott. Yeah, I actually spoke with Eric, her cousin, and I've been texting Lynn, but I'm not.
How is Lynn?
Is
she all right?
Yeah. I'm trying to get in touch with her. I spoke to Eric, the cousin who I know.
Do you remember her sheep? She had a sheep called Barbara. Yeah. She had a sheep called Barbara because she was on the show having a chat. And there was this...
It died.
No, it didn't. She had it slaughtered and ate it. She came back on the show a few weeks later, and there's this cute sheep in the background and living in her homestead or whatever. And so when she came back on, how's Barbara then? How's Barbara? Oh, we've eaten it now. Lynn Scott, God bless you. Anyway, she wasn't here. Carl, yes, and Simon, can we do this maybe? Do you fancy picking this up? I don't know, maybe next week or so, week after, something like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, we should maybe if your viewers want, we could you could share some of the because there's a bunch of questions, so we could share some. You could share some of those.
All right, if that's all right with you, I will. I'll share that document that you sent me. I'll tell you, nobody has prepared for a show like you prepared for tonight's show. Nobody, ever. For this show, anyway, including me.
It's tuberculosis, really, so...
Yeah.
We've already covered.
Well, look, good luck with the Viagra.
I'll tell you. Yeah, I'm on the up.
You can report back. Tell us how that's going.
All right, thanks, Nick.
And I'll see you all tomorrow, folks. God bless you. Have a good night. 9 o'clock. And hey, if you haven't, go over to dailychaos.news, register, sign up. It should all be working now, yeah? The registration thing, it should be working now, because I think I sorted that out. Yeah, there you go. It was me, as usual. Here's to us, and bugger plutocracy.